Hey guys, Lord Naren White here, the Holy Ghost, the one true God. Back with you with the next video in my series, Great Expectations by Charles Dickens, in his two cabin rooms at the top of the house, which were fresh and airy, and in which Mr. Barley was less audible than below. I found Provis comfortably settled. He expressed no alarm, and seemed to feel none that was worth mentioning. But it struck me that he was softened indefinably, for I could not have said how, and could never afterwards recall when I tried. But certainly, the opportunity that the day's rest had given me for reflection had resulted in my fully determining to say nothing to him respecting Compeyson. For anything I knew, his animosity towards the man might otherwise lead to his seeking him out and rushing on his own destruction. Therefore, when Herbert and I sat down with him by his fire, I asked him, first of all, whether he relied on Wemmick's judgment and the sources of information. Aye, dear boy, he answered, with a grave nod. Jaggers knows. Then I have talked with Wemmick, said I, and have come to tell you what caution he gave me and what advice. This I did accurately, with the reservation just mentioned, and I told him how Wemmick had heard, in Newgate prison, whether from officers or prisoners I could not say, that he was under some suspicion, and that my chambers had been watched, how Wemmick had recommended his keeping close for a time, and my keeping away from him, and what Wemmick had said about getting him abroad. I added that, of course, when the time came, I should go with him, or should follow close upon him, as might be safest in Wemmick's judgment. What was to follow that, I did not touch upon, neither indeed was I at all clear or comfortable about it in my own mind. Now that I saw him in the softer condition and in declared peril for my sake, as to altering my way of living by enlarging my expenses, I put it to him whether in our present unsettled and difficult circumstances it would not be simply ridiculous if it were no worse. He could not deny this, and indeed was very reasonable throughout. His coming back was a venture, he said, and he always had known it to be a venture. He would do nothing to make it a desperate venture, and he had very little fear of his safety with such good help. Herbert, who had been looking at the fire and pondering, here said that something had come into his thoughts, arising out of Wemmick's suggestion, which it might be worth while to pursue. We are both good watermen, and could take him down by the river ourselves, when the right time comes. No boat would then be hired for the purpose, and no boatman. That would save at least a chance of suspicion, and any chance is worth saving. Never mind the season. Don't you think it might be a good thing if you began at once to keep a boat in the at the temple stairs, and were in the habit of rowing up and down the river? You fall into that habit, and then who notices or minds? Do it 20 or 50 times, and there is nothing special in your doing in the 21st or 51st. I liked this scheme, and Provis was quite elated by it. We agreed that it should be carried into execution, and that Provis should never recognize us if we came below bridge, and rode past Mill Pond Bank. But we further agreed that he should pull down the blind in that part of his window, which gave upon the east, whenever he saw us, and all was right. Our conference being now ended, and everything arranged, I rose to go, remarking to Herbert that he and I had better not go home together, and that I would take half an hour's start of him. I don't like to leave you here, I said to Provis, though I cannot doubt your being safer here than near me. Goodbye. Dear boy, he answered, clasping my hands, I don't know when we say meet again, and I don't like goodbye. Say good night. Good night. Herbert will go regularly between us, and when the time comes you may be certain I shall be ready. Good night, good night! We thought it best that he should stay in his own rooms, and we left him on the landing outside his door, holding a light over the stair rail to light us downstairs. Looking back at him, I thought of the first night of his return, when our positions were reversed, and when I little supposed my heart could be ever as heavy and anxious as parting from him as it was now. Old Barley was growling and swearing when we repassed his door, with no appearance of having ceased or of meaning to cease. When we got to the foot of the stairs, I asked Herbert whether he had preserved the name of Provis. He replied, certainly not, and that the lodger was Mr. Campbell. He also explained that the utmost known of Mr. Campbell there was that he, Herbert, had Mr. Campbell consigned to him, and felt a strong personal interest in his being well cared for, and living a secluded life. So, when we went into the parlor where Mrs. Wimple and Clara were seated at work, I said nothing of my own interest in Mr. Campbell, but kept it to myself. When I had taken leave of the pretty, gentle, dark-eyed girl, and of the motherly woman who had not outlived her honest sympathy with a little affair of true love, I felt as if the old green copper rope walk had grown quite a different place. Old Barley might be as old as the hills, and might swear like a whole field of troopers. But there were redeeming youth and trust and hope enough in Chinks's basin to fill it to overflowing. And then I thought of Estella and of our parting, and went home very sadly. All things were as quiet in the temple as ever I had seen them. The windows of the rooms on that side, lately occupied by Provis, were dark and still, and there were no longer in Garden Court. I walked past the fountain twice or thrice before I descended the steps that were between me and my rooms, but I was quite alone. Herbert coming down to my bedside when he came in, for I went straight to bed, dispirited and fatigued, made the same report. Opening one of the windows after that, he looked out into the moonlight, and told me that the pavement was as solemnly empty as the pavement of any cathedral at that same hour. Next day, I set myself to gather the boat. To get the boat. It was soon done, and the boat was brought round to the temple stairs, and lay where I could reach her within a minute or two. Then I began to go out, as for training and practice, sometimes alone, sometimes with Herbert. I was often out in cold rain and sleet, but nobody took much note of me after I had been out a few times. At first I kept above Blackfriars Bridge, but as the hours of the tide changed, I took towards London Bridge. It was old London Bridge in those days, and at certain states of the tide there was a race and fall of water there, which gave it a bad reputation. But I knew well enough how to shoot the bridge after seeing it done, and so began to row about among the shipping in the Pool and down to Erith. The first time I passed Mill Pond Bank, Herbert and I were pulling a pair of oars, and both in going and returning, we saw the blind towards the east come down. Herbert was rarely there less frequently than 3 times in a week, and he never brought me a single word of intelligence that was at all alarming. Still, I knew that there was cause for alarm. I could not get rid of the notion of being watched. Once received, it is a haunting idea. How many undesigning persons I suspected of watching me, it would be hard to calculate. In short, I was always full of fears for the rash man who was in hiding. Herbert had sometimes said to me that he found it pleasant to stand at one of our windows after dark, when the tide was running down, and to think that it was flowing, with everything it bore, towards Clara. But I thought with dread that it was flowing towards Magwitch, and that any black mark on its surface might be his pursuers, going swiftly, silently, and surely to take him. We'll go ahead and stop there for this week. as usual, I want to say thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. Please like, comment, and subscribe, as it greatly helps the channel. Light be with you all. Take care, and thanks again.